What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the SchuZ Show. I'm your guys' host, Zach SchuZ Schumaker. Obviously, a very, very late episode tonight. I had no guest planned, but I still wanted to get live on here real quick and address some of the news that's happened in the boxing world over the duration of the past weekend. Now, it's a little bit different. There were no big fights this weekend. So there's not any fight recaps or anything to get into, so it's a much different Monday episode. But that does not mean big news did not come out. And some things I'm going to get into today. We have more clarity on what the Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford undercard is going to look like. I'll be giving you guys that news. Then I'm going to get into the news regarding the tragedy in Japan featuring the 2 deaths. I'll be getting to that and the new rules that's going to be put into place in Japan. Also, on today's show, I'll then be getting to some fight announcements, and I'll also be discussing the new pay-per-view era and what that looks like with the UFC's breaking news deal that happened earlier this morning. So, lots to get into on today's show. But let's get right to it now. If you guys do have any comments or questions or topics that you guys want me to address on today's show, make sure to leave it in the chat, and I will address as we go throughout the duration of today's show. Let's get into the very first thing, though. I knew it had to be coming up quite soon. With September 13th quickly approaching, the Legion Stadium fight between Terence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez taking place on Netflix, I figured we had to start knowing some of the undercard details and started coming out now over this weekend. For starters, Turki Al-Sheikh did announce a little bit ago that there was going to be a unique game plan, that this card is going to be multiple days, with it being debatably the biggest fight due to it being at the Legion Stadium, to the biggest name fighters, so on and so forth. This was going to be a long, drawn-out card situation here, and we now more clear on what it's going to look like, because on September 11th, Jarrell Miller, Michael Hunter, 2 of the top American heavyweights, will be clashing on September 11th. That is 2 days prior to the actual fight. So, just to bring more clarity to this entire Canelo Alvarez, Terence Crawford is almost going to turn into almost a week-long, massive fight week and everything going down. And when you talk about having this fight, which is a good fight, interesting fight, going down multiple days before we even have the big show, it looks like it's going to be stacked. So it's going to be a very, very fun week for boxing fans, that September 11th week. Now, that was supposed to be Jared Anderson's slot. I gave my thoughts on Jared Anderson after Jarrell Miller accused him of backing out of that fight. Brutal news for Jared Anderson. I think he blew a massive opportunity, but still, great news on this regards. However, there was some interesting stuff, and it appears that these deals have now been finalized, so the deal is going to happen. This fight will go down. However, Dana White's TKO and Sela issued a cease and desist by Don King. The legendary promoter Don King has announced that he has issued a cease and desist in order to Sela and TKO, fronted by UFC CEO Dana White, after the group announced the bout between Michael Hunter and Jarrell Miller for September 11th. King argues that Hunter is under contract with him and that the WBA has ruled that he owns the promotional rights to a Hunter Kubrat Pulev WBA regular title fight. Hunter is under contract to Don King's Productions, and he'll be fighting for a world championship. Out of nowhere, here comes Don King. And what's interesting about Don King, he's had his prime days, but he's far removed from those days. But once or twice a year, this man just comes out of nowhere and tries to stop big fights. And I get it, he's a promoter and so on and so forth, but why is those other fights not getting negotiated? We know that he was in line for that, Michael Hunter was, to fight Kubrat, but we never heard any news about this. And it seems, as I said, all the situation and issues there seem to have been settled now. It seems that this fight's officially going to happen on September 11th. Maybe there's some legal system stuff that still has to happen. Maybe they hammered out the deal. I don't know what it looks like exactly. But it seems that this fight is officially going to be set for September 11th. However, what I will say is this. For Don King, he's well past his prime. We've already discussed that. And Don King needs to figure out what's going to happen here. He's got to stick with the times if he wants to keep doing it. I applaud him for still trying to stay in boxing. I applaud him for what he's done throughout his boxing career and what he's done on the promotional side and what he's done and what he's brought to the sport. However, when you have the Noel McMillan situation, when you have this situation now, you got to figure it out. You got to keep your guys active. Too many of your guys that are legitimate fighters are not fighting at the right times. They're behind schedule. They're not going according to their careers and plans, and he's screwing with a lot of guys' careers. So I'm glad they got this deal hammered out, and hopefully I get situated now. Let's head over to some other fights that got announced. Sergey Bohachuk is scheduled to return to the ring on the undercard of Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford. The possible opponent is Brand Adams. I love that fight. That's been rumored for a little bit now. I hope that one gets solidified. It's not an official fight, but Sergey Bohachuk will be on the fight card, and Brand Adams would be a perfect opponent in my eyes. Also, the fights that have been officially announced, Christian and Billy Lester Martinez. I know this was rumored this was going to happen, but I've already said it before. This fight is mega. We have to start looking post-Canelo Alvarez at 168. Canelo is the man. He's going to hold all the belts at 168 until he retires for the most part. I don't see any of the other contenders possibly messing with Canelo Alvarez, just being honest. Unless somebody moves up, he moves up, whatever it is. So therefore, we have to start looking at this. Canelo is on a hourglass. It is quickly dwindling in terms of how much more time he's got left in the sport. And when you look at it from that standpoint, 168, you're starting to see a lot of these young guys start to solidify themselves. This fight right here could give us an idea of who's going to be up next. Christian and Billy, Lester Martinez, two guys that legitimate diehard boxing fans know very well. But for one reason or another, they have not gotten the credit. They have not gotten the attention that they probably deserve. Both very entertaining fighters, very talented guys at 168. And I believe that both these guys will be future world champions. This is a fight that you could consider a world championship level fight. I know it's not for a world championship, but when you look at those expectations, two very, very talented fighters, you can make a debate. Two of the top 3, 4, 5 guys at 168 fighting each other. This will be a fantastic fight right there. Callum Walsh, Fernando Vargas Jr., not the most entertaining fight, but a big fight nonetheless. Callum Walsh does have a little bit of a step-up fight here, but Callum Walsh is a guy that a lot of people are very high on, including myself, but he's still working on progressing. He's still working on making sure he can get to a higher level and compete at 154. This is a good step up for himself. Also, it allows a lot more people to get to know who he is. And I do like Callum Walsh. I think he's a great fighter. It's good for him to get some more eyes there. Remember, this fight is going down on September 13th at Allegiant Stadium, so I'm sure we'll have a little bit more details in regards to who else will be on that fight. But as I said, the fight card's going to essentially be lasting for multiple days, so we will end up seeing what unfolds there. This is going to be a transition period now. Over the past 36 hours, 48 hours, however we want to look at it, maybe whatever it's been, this weekend I should specify, there was some tragic news that came out of Japan. 2 fighters on the same card, Hiromasa Urakawa and Shigetoshi Kotari, both passed away following the fights. This is not the only issue that we've had in Japan this year. This has been a continual issue. Multiple people have been seriously injured, have had brain injuries, brain treatments, emergency brain surgeries, had been carted out of the ring, so on and so forth. And this is traditionally speaking, but even more so in recent years, and this year specifically. This is becoming a legitimate problem in Japan. And I understand culture-wise, the way they fight, so on and so forth, these type of things have happened. It's become something that boxing fans have in a way now become accustomed to. But that does not mean it's right, and massive changes are definitely needed here. To give you guys the details on this fight, both guys sustained injuries and passed away on the fight card that occurred on August 2nd, though in separate bouts. For Kotari, he is 28 years old. He fought to a draw against Yamato Hata. He collapsed post-fight, diagnosed with Subaru hematoia, and then underwent brain surgery, passed away on Friday. He was competing for a regional title and nearing top 15 global ranking. As for Urakawa, he lost via stoppage in round 8 to Saito. He suffered his very first career stoppage loss. He underwent emergency surgery, passed away on Saturday. He had lost 3 of his last 4 fights, though. This is interesting here. Both deaths have now been confirmed by boxing organizations WBC and WBO. What does this mean for the sport moving forward? Well, boxing is in a very interesting place in Japan. They are one of the most diehard boxing fans in the world. You can put them right up there with the UK. However, what's happening right now needs to have changes. There was emergency meetings set in place by those in charge of making the Japanese boxing rules. They've already negotiated some plans. One of which is that they're going to be reducing the OPBF and WBO Asia Pacific title matches in Japan. They will be reduced from 12 rounds to 10 rounds immediately now. This is very interesting, both domestically and internationally. So these are regional titles. These are for the country of Japan when they fight working their way up to the world title levels. These fights will now be dropped down to 10 rounds. Here's what's interesting, though. I just talked about it. The fight that happened this past weekend with Urakawa, he lost in round 8, not 12. So these things are still happening regardless of what happens. That's why immediate response is going to be needed. New game plans need to be put in place, more protection for fighters, because it's not an issue occurring in many other countries. And I'm one of the biggest fans of Japanese boxing. I'm always up watching those fights happen. I missed this card, but most of the time I'm always up watching these fights happen. It's brutal to see what's happening, and there needs to be legitimate changes. So here are some things that happened in the meeting today. I should say yesterday, I guess. The changes follow the ring injuries and deaths of these 2 boxers. The JBC and Japan Professional Boxing Association will hold an emergency meeting on August 12th to discuss further safety measures. Concerns about weight management, weight loss, and pre-match conditioning are seen as the major contributing factors. This emphasized the need for input from those closely involved with the athletes beyond administrative insight. Current pre-weigh in rules are 12% weight gain, limit 30 days prior, 7% 2 weeks prior, lack penalties. He advocates for more binding regulations. So that's one thing I think they're going to address, is making sure that the weight cut process is not as extreme in Japan, and therefore helping fighters go into the fight at full strength. Everybody knows around the world that boxing weigh-ins and the weight cutting process is debatably the most dangerous portion of all combat sports. That's not debated. We all know these are facts by the doctors. Whether you are anywhere in the world, this is an issue. Japan does have a little bit of a different structure in place right now in Japan, and that is something that they're going to look into, putting more punishment on weight cuts and advancing those different periods. Now, what are the exact rules going to look like? We'll be finding out within the next 24 hours. However, this is one of the big things they're going to be looking at, and I feel like this has a chance of being something massive for Japan. The weight cutting process, in my opinion, needs to start being taken control of better around boxing, around the whole world. The weight cutting process is brutal, is damaging guys, and people talk about this. Doctors have said this multiple times. It is the most dangerous portion of boxing. Not even what happens inside the ring. And we've seen that. The way Chris Eubank Jr. looked when he was trying to get ready for the Conor Ben fight, he looked much worse at that moment in time than he did inside the ring. No ifs, ands, and buts about that. What's happening in these guys' bodies is extreme. And I know it's guys to take this advantage. They got to go in many pounds above weight, so on and so forth. But listen, if we need to get closer to a position in boxing where more guys are weighing in at the proper weights, then so be it. If it is for the health of these fighters, then let's make it happen. But I will add this other aspect to this. When we look at the Japan boxing situation, weight cutting is also an issue across the globe. These tragic incidences that are occurring in Japan on the regular are not happening in America. They're not happening in the UK. They're not happening in most parts around the world. This is a predominant Japan issue right now in boxing. So other issues they're going to be looking into is educational measures and investigating that aspect. A committee will be formed to investigate the accidents. A medical seminar is scheduled for early September to explore preventative strategies. All of these things seem to be going into place right now when it comes to figuring out what is happening. And I'll make this very clear. Change is needed. I personally look at this and I realize this. The culture in Japan is a much more do or die type mentality when you step in front of that ring. You can almost always count on those fight cards to deliver. Why? Because it's going to be all action. A lot of boxing people out there, people that are not big boxing fans, look at boxing and say, well, it's not very entertaining. There's a lot of guys trying to dance around the Tom and Jerry stuff. When you go to Japan, there's no Tom and Jerry stuff. Guys are not running around. They're going to get hit. Look at Japanese boxing. It's why it's one of the most entertaining styles of boxing around the world. Mexican style and Japanese style. What that does to guys in the ring, though, is causing massive damage. And I'm not saying we remove ourselves away from that style. This is the style that guys have grown to love and are exceptional in. Junta Nakatani, Inoue, all these different guys have mastered it and done it at a high level. But what does need to change is more preventative situations by the corners. I personally feel this is the biggest problem with Japanese boxing. The corners are not taking care of their fighters. And I know it's a cultural thing for the most part, but more corners need to step up and help out their fighters. More corners need to go out to the defense and throw in the towel earlier on in the fight. I remember one fight just most recently that comes to mind. When Brian Norman Jr. and Jin Sasaki fought each other, Jin Sasaki should never have had to experience that brutal KO. His corner should have thrown in that towel and got rid of that fight earlier on in the fight. Round 2 or 3, called it off. That's not something you're ever going to see in Japan right now, and that's the biggest issue in my eyes when we talk about Japanese boxing. Let's head over to other massive news that came out in combat sports as a whole. Now, I'm going to address some UFC news, and you might wonder, why am I talking about UFC on a boxing show today? Well, what happened this morning in the UFC with their groundbreaking Paramount deal is going to lead to, or needs to lead to, rapid change in boxing. So let me give you guys the details and I'll explain what I'm saying here. The UFC has signed a $7.7 billion broadcast deal with Paramount to make Paramount Plus the new home of the UFC starting 2026. Fans in the US will have access to all UFC content without a pay-per-view model, making it more affordable and accessible to view the greatest fights on a massive platform. Currently, here's the numbers. $120 was the cost for UFC in 2026 now. This year, if you want to watch all of UFC's events, it will cost you right around $1,160. Also, on top of this, let's remember the issue with Top Rank right now. Top Rank does not have a TV deal. ESPN did not want to renew that Top Rank deal at around $80 million annually. This is a problem in boxing. And I'm just going to be brutally honest. People can say what they want to say about Dana White and overall at large TKO. Whether you like what they do or not, you cannot deny that the rapid exponential growth of UFC and TKO as a whole. What they have done is proving evident when you talk about these TV deals that the WWE and now the UFC just secured. These are massive billion-dollar deals that are getting signed off. And why? Because both brands have become international massive companies and productions where TV companies and viewership wants them. They are some of the biggest things in all of America right now and all the world. These sports of MMA, wrestling are rapidly growing. And I still would say boxing is a little bit above them. However, the gap is quickly shrinking, but this gap can be fixed by boxing. And how do you do this? Well, one is boxing needs to give them a more modern timeline. This is not the 80s anymore, nor is it the 90s. It's not even the early 2000s. Boxing needs to make rapid change. The UFC has officially ditched the pay-per-view model. It's over with. Yet boxing is sitting in a position right now where so many of these fights and events going on right now are still requiring pay-per-views. And it's always led to more pirating. Always led to these other issues going on in boxing, and more people have less and less access to watching boxing. Unacceptable. You have the NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, so on and so forth. The best of the best events in these fights or these events in sports are able to be accessed and viewed by people around the world. And yet when it comes to combat sports, that's gone with. And I get it's traditional, but guess what? Tradition is great, but tradition sometimes needs changing and modification. The sport in and of itself is fine. But what needs changing in boxing is making sure that there is more laws, make it more governed, and put more regulations into boxing. It needs to follow suit. You need more structure brought into boxing immediately. This is what the UFC has done with Dana White. And that is why I believe that Dana White entering into boxing is massive for the sport. Because boxing is lawless right now. There is no fundamentals. There's nothing going on in boxing right now that keeps it structured. It's all over the place. You have so many promoters, so many things going on all over the place. Nothing is fine-tuned. And if you're someone that does not know boxing, you look at it just overwhelming. How do you possibly take in everything going on in boxing right now? There is so much happening with so many different people. It's ungoverned, and this has caused a massive issue, and it's reflecting the TV deals. Top Rank can't even get renewed for $80 million per year from ESPN. ESPN said, we don't want that. What does that show about the brand? Yes, the Zone deserves plenty of credit for how they're giving boxing a chance to stay alive and afloat. But more people need to step up. The pay-per-view era is over. If you want to stick with the modern day times, you need to remove yourself from the pay-per-view era and step foot into a new era where people actually have access for it. I'm not saying it has to be free. UFC is $120 for the entire year to watch all UFC promotions. It will be 43 cards throughout the year for $120. You could spend $120 on 1 or 2 weekends a year in boxing. Boxing needs to rapidly shift itself so that more people have access to boxing. Big platforms with not a lot of payments. It's the new era. There's other ways to make revenue, and this needs to get done immediately. Because what the UFC did today needs to push and put a lot of pressure on boxing to make rapid change. And I think it's good because, listen, TKO is getting involved in boxing now. It starts with Canelo and Bud Crawford. Dana White's in charge. And he said on that same address when he announced the UFC deal that he's now looking into what the new boxing era is going to look like. And this is huge. What is he able to get done? What's the deal he hammers out and with who for TKO boxing? And I think that whatever happens there, people need to follow suit. Massive change needs to happen in boxing if it wants to stay afloat. As I said, I think boxing as a whole still has a bigger international market than these other sports do. But you cannot deny this. UFC and overall, obviously, the sport of MMA, and then wrestling with the WWE is quickly catching up ground. What's boxing going to do about it? We'll see what happens. Other fight announcements have now been made in regards to boxing fights in the future. Let's get into some of them now, though. Oscar Collazo will defend his ring, WBA, and WBO strawweight world titles versus Jason Vason on September 20th in Indio, California. Oscar Collazo, congratulations on the win. You will be winning that fight. I think Collazo is great. It's just a matter of time until he moves up in weight classes. Collazo is one of the most entertaining fighters at the lighter weight classes. Some people say they don't want to watch lighter weight classes. Oscar Collazo is a very, very talented fighter. He will become a multiple division champion by the time he retires. He'll get an easy win there. Also, Ring Magazine champion Gabriela Fundora will also be defending her undisputed flyweight world titles in that same fight card. So that's going to be interesting. Fundora is phenomenal, one of the brightest young women in all of boxing. She's someone to keep an eye on as well. Shocking news here. Danny Garcia will be returning to the ring on October 18th in the main event of his own boxing card at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. All right, Danny Garcia, we all know who he is in boxing, but he's now kind of shifted into this promotional game. And I like it. He's done a pretty good job so far, I'd say. But now he's going to be headlining his own boxing card at the Barclays Center, which is impressive. We'll see what this looks like. Here's the most intriguing news why I bring this up, though. Top Rank will be providing fighters to help fill the October 18th card at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York, headlined by the return of Danny Garcia. The plan is to keep their fighters active while they work on securing a new platform. Why is this significant? One of which is we've already seen many top-ranked fighters find separate cards around the country right now. But that's for August. Supposedly, it appears off this, and I'm just reading between the thin lines right now, that by them wanting to keep their fighters active, they're supplying Danny Garcia to have this different top-ranked fighters on their card. This is October 18th. So you're telling me there's a legitimate chance that Top Rank will not have a TV deal finalized in the month of August or September or even through mid-October? That is a little bit concerning. And once again, it goes back to what I just talked about. They need to get those situations figured out with TV deals. It's a mess in boxing and it needs to get situated. We'll see what happens there. Also has now been announced, Jaron Boots Ennis will face Uisma Lima in a WBA super welterweight title eliminator on October 11th in Philadelphia. WBA super welterweight title picture currently involves Terence Bud Crawford being the WBA champion. All expectations point to this, that Bud Crawford will vacate that belt regardless if he wins or loses against Canelo Alvarez. I don't think he will ever fight at 154 again. I think he likely will retire following the Canelo Alvarez fight or stay up there at 168. Who knows? But WBA champion Terence Bud Crawford. Interim champion is Yolannis Tellez. He defends versus Abbas Baru on August 23rd. That winner will obviously still be the interim champion. And then you have a situation where that winner will fight Jaron Boots Ennis versus Uisma Lima winner, which is happening on October 11th. Those two guys will then fight. Either the interim champion will be promoted to the actual full champion, and you'll just have a defense, or you will have those two guys fight each other for the world championship, depending on how the timing lines up with Bud Crawford and his announcement. That's the new picture at 154. So with Bud Crawford likely not return to 154, it just matters about timing. How does that unfold? And likely what will happen is we're going to have a fight between Tellez and a Abbas Baru winner and Jaron Boots Ennis for the 154 World Championship, which is huge. Boots Ennis moving up to 154 and already getting World Championship shot in his second fight is massive for his legacy. I think he will become World Champion, and that then sets the picture up for a potential World Championship unification fight. Vergil Ortiz take care of his business as well later next year. That's how I see the game plan happening. The last fight news I want to get into, former world title challenger Jordan Thompson will make his heavyweight debut against the WBA's number 3 Lenier on November 1st in Orlando, live on DAZN. Amari Jones will also be on this card. A very intriguing prospect there. Interesting fight. Jordan Thompson moving up to heavyweight. Lenier should get the win there, although he's a little bit debatable there, but we'll see what's unfolding there. Those are the fights that got announced this weekend, so we're starting to get some movement. As I've said, this month of August is kind of a dead period for boxing. We have a big fight card this weekend in Riyadh season. Outside of that, it's a little bit dead up until the Canelo Alvarez and Terence Bud Crawford fight card, when you also have Patty Donovan and Lewis Crocker, MJ versus Inoue, so on and so forth. So that's what we have in store for this week. I'll be giving you guys previews as we get closer to the weekend. But with that being said, that does conclude today's show. I don't see any comments currently in the comment section, so I'll wrap today's show with that. But I do appreciate you guys all for tuning in tonight's show. I hope you guys have a blessed rest of you guys' night, or whenever you guys check in, have a great Tuesday if you guys are on Tuesday now. And I will see you guys back live tomorrow. I will have a guest who will be announced tomorrow afternoon. So I'll see you guys tomorrow at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I hope you guys have a blessed rest of you guys' Monday. May God bless you guys all. And I will see you guys back live tomorrow at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I'll see you guys tomorrow. God bless you guys. And with that being said, SchuZ out. God bless.